my favorite Indian philosopher, my Professor Bhagat sir is here. Uh, as this is the last episode of Existential Philosophy lecture series, which cannot be completed without the greatest existential philosopher of our times from India. And we are truly privileged to have you, sir, Professor Bhagat. And Professor Bhagat is currently the chairperson of Center for Philosophy, JNU. He is former director of Institute of Advanced Studies, JNU. He is former chairperson of Special Center for the Study of Northeast India, JNU, and Center for Media Studies, Social School of Social Sciences, JNU. His expertise includes, but not confined to, phenomenology, existentialism, cultural studies, and aesthetics, identity politics, ethics, and many more. So today we will get a chance to learn about consciousness and lived experience, which is very important notion of existentialism, and to understand any culture or any ideology or community, we need to engage with the lived experiences. So I'm very proud to have you, sir, here. And one more thing, I'm very proud to share with you that Bhagat sir is my supervisor for MPhil and PhD. So I warmly welcome you, sir. Our next speaker is Dr. Rajiba Behera, who is also absolutely versatile personality, and he is currently an assistant professor at the Department of Philosophy and Religion, Banaras Hindu University, which is very close to my heart. And his area of specialization is analytical philosophy, philosophy of mind, philosophy of language. And we will be equally delighted to uh, uh, hear on the tracing boundaries through technolingualism and metrolingualism, Quine and Heidegger's perspective. So I'm very glad to welcome you both in my cafe. So we can start with um, Bhagat sir's speech, and both the speakers will get 35 minutes each for their presentations following questionnaire round. So may I now request Bhagat sir to start his talk and add grace to our cafe.
Thank you. Thank you, Sipra, and also so many known faculties here. Uh, so it's one of you I am unable to call, but I'm really happy that I have been asked to give views on this topic, existential philosophy. But I was not very sure whether I would join or not, but then Sipra is very smart. He would mention Professor Rakesh Chandra's name, and to whom I can't say no. And that is how I am here. So briefly, but I am moving away from a general trend of talking about existentialism. As we all know that once you are into academics, you keep on learning. And these days I'm into Dilthe, which I didn't earlier studied. And I found that I did a great stupid thing, reading only Sartre and Heidegger, but not reading such philosophers who are normally not taken that seriously within the philosophy circle. So that is how I had been trying to move into borderlines of philosophizing. And we cannot strictly confine particular ways of philosophizing as the only way of doing philosophy. And that is why I have thought of bringing Dilthey and Husserl a little bit on the study of consciousness. Well, as you all know that, I hope I am audible, clear enough. My voice is okay?
It's a little low.
Yeah, it will, hopefully it will
Yeah.
come up. I'll increase the volume a little bit. As we know that the term consciousness, the concept itself, has been also metaphysically very sound concept, and it has its own strength of harping on consciousness as a metaphysical substance. But my take here would be with many of the phenomenologists who would see consciousness more as a tool or medium of engaging with the world, or a tool to comprehend the world. That is how I looked at consciousness. And to that extent, consciousness need not necessarily be metaphysicalized or substantiated, or would be called as a substance, but as a way to understand or comprehend the world. And the easiest way to begin is, how do I talk about this world? Even our sitting together and listening to one another, expecting others to ask questions to me, and my trying to put across certain views. These are, in a way, shaped by certain awareness I have in association with you. I try to engage with you. And this engaging with each one of us is by virtue of being conscious, to be aware about. So this awareness is peculiarly human. And that is where I talked about consciousness as a tool. Now, when I said consciousness as a tool, one may abstain from either putting a metaphysical connotation to this idea of consciousness, or even make it mysterious, certain mystical about, which you will also find in continental philosophy in the West, that this consciousness is even taken into a particular form of transcendence, which could be mystical, and that can come very closely associated with the Indian classical thinking, as well as in the Arabic Islamic worldview. So we know that consciousness within the continental tradition has had different strains of being explained. Many of our association with existentialism and phenomenology is with those non-theistic secular philosophers, say Jean-Paul Sartre, Heidegger, Husserl, and so on. And we know, or we speak very little about Paul Tillich or Marcel or many other philosophers who may go into theistic trend of philosophizing, where consciousness get a certain level of mystical, transcendental acceptance. I'm not going to that extent. Not that I defy or deny, but I will limit myself to those philosophers who think that consciousness studies is important tool or perspective to understand human reality. And these philosophers will not shy away from using the word science. So there are philosophers within the continental tradition who wants to talk about a scientific objective study of the human with consciousness as a strong constituent component. And that is where I would like to submit my focus would be here. If you remember, the typical positivist realist perspective about understanding the world is that the world exists independent of me, independent of each one of us. And our responsibility or epistemic responsibility is to comprehend this world through language, which are whose job is to explain that reality as close as possible. So language is a tool through which we try to not only comprehend the reality out there independent of us, and it is through this language that we try to represent. We try to observe, we try to explain, and the role of language is very limited to explaining that reality called the world. And that is what science does. Science uses vocabulary, concepts, language to observe and represent or explain uh, the world as a reality. And to the extent that they will predict the happenings of the world in a particular way. This is what natural science does. And as we know that when positivism emerged, emergence of sociology, Auguste Comte and others, the effort has been to replicate a large portion of this scientific inquiry, positivist in methodology they call, to employ the same method of observation, analysis, verification, and even prediction of human behavior and human actions or collective actions, collective human life, so to say. So this has been one trend of scientifically trying to understand society. And this is what positivism as a strong school of thought has been doing to explain social reality. Now, why I thought of entering into the works of Dilthey Limited is that Dilthey also talked about need to have a human science. So our study of social reality has to be scientifically studied, but with a caution that the nature of science, or what he called human science, must not be replicated or equated with that of the natural science. And if we employ the same methodology that we employ in the understanding of nature, in terms of causal explanation of human behavior and association, that is going to limit our understanding of human nature to a large extent. And his idea of the human science is significantly different from that of the natural science. Now, this idea of human science, what I found interesting is it constitutes largely and significantly the role of consciousness and human will. And if you look at many of philosopher, Bergson, or even Nietzsche and many others, the will, or which comes from free will, is a significant component. And this idea of consciousness and will, a human will, somehow gives a check and balance to those theorizing which tries to explain human actions and behavior in terms of causal explanation. Because it is the human will which will go contrary to human actions to be explained in terms of cause and effect. Because if you look at the very primary methodology of natural science, is one that nature is uniform. And secondly, whatever happens in nature as a phenomenon as we observe are in terms of an effect of an antecedent, which we call as cause. So cause is an antecedent to an effect, and that effect could be an antecedent to another effect, which you call as consequence. So the chain of cause and effect relationship is how the natural science harp on. And that is why you can predict that this is being done by Skinner and many other psychologists who does the experiment and would say that if A, in a particular condition, if A happens and B follows, if similar conditions comes with A, then B will definitely follow. So this causal explanation of human actions in terms of behavior is something largely deterministic in nature. So in our effort to make a human science positivistically, depending on the causal relationship, somehow we undermine the nature of human freedom and will. And that is where I find the entry of consciousness as a very significant component to understand human actions. Because once you recognize that there is something called consciousness, which is outside the purview of causal explanation, a consciousness which is an impetus to our willing. And by will, as we all know, that will is all about our desire, our imagination, our project making to be what we are yet to be. Because we cannot be, the human beings cannot be explained only in terms of his present disposition, present givenness. But we are also explained in terms of our desire, our projects, our imagination, our emotive feeling. And this directedness towards something other than the given present, towards a particular future, towards a particular possibility, can be done only if we recognize that there is something called consciousness, which moves our will, which moves our feeling, which moves our imagination. And that is where I found Dilthey extremely interesting, that you talk about possibility of scientifically, scientific here is about objectivity, objectively being able to explain human nature, but not in terms of prediction and causal explanation, but in terms of human will and consciousness. Now, let me take a little more time about what I see this consciousness as. One way is, if you have already been very familiar with a popular philosopher called Edmund Husserl, as we all know, that his effort has been to dissect the nature of, conceptually dissect the nature of consciousness and try to understand what this consciousness is all about. Like he talks of intentionality and directedness. Consciousness cannot be substantival, but always it is in direction towards something in the world, right? I will not go into detail. We can have discussion on this. But my point here is, while Husserl is talking of consciousness, conceptually dissecting the very nature of consciousness itself through what he called intentionality, and much work has been done onto this. what I found interesting about Dilthey is that not that Husserl does not recognize it, but Husserl's emphasis, if you remember, has been very much into temporal and spatial locatedness of this consciousness. Like, he doesn't talk about the past, present, and future in a categorized form, but as a continuum in the present. I think I should not extend too much into this, but only one, I always avoid using jargons without explaining it. But today because of the time shortage, I'm doing that part. The concept called adumbration in Husserl, which talks about protension and retention of the awareness when we try to comprehend an object of reality. We can discuss this if you have questions on it. But my more interesting take is that while Husserl is talking about recognizing temporality, recognizing spatiality, but confining to, quote unquote, the presence of how
recording in progress.
What I found in Dilthey is, number one, recognition that I am not alone. I, as a human, is not an isolated individual self. Unfortunately, both in the Indian classical tradition, even in the West, nearest one whom we talk about is René Descartes, right? Whom we call as propounder of modern Western philosophy. Even there you will find recognition and prioritization to the self, the individual, the cogito, a thinking self. He doesn't talk about the collective. Not that he doesn't recognize, but the priority of philosophizing for Descartes is the ego, and that is the self. Whereas in Dilthey, what I found interesting is this, the human is always a collective, a social. So you are amidst the other. You are in a relationship of association. So when we try to talk about the human, it is not about Bhagat, Sipra, or Miraji, or Rajiba, or Tripathi, or it's Priyanka, individual, but as a collective. He is to be understood in terms of association of will and awareness. The very fact that we are together in this platform itself shows that I am not an isolated individual. Of course, I have a being which is isolated, a bodily being, but my bodily being, my talking makes no sense unless there are others who are appreciating or critiquing what I'm saying. So my presence is in association with others. The social self has to come in the forefront. This is one. And secondly, I am not a temporarily fixed being in time, but I am a part of a continuum. That is, I am a product of history. That I evolve. What I am today is an evolvement of what I was. So that my past and possible future that to come. So these two, the sociality and historicity, are two significant components of any of our intellectual discourse where we try to comprehend the nature of human being. So it is no more about a fixed individual, a free, fixed individual, singular self, but an individual in association with others as a collective, and a collective which is evolving in time, in historicity. And if we recognize this, And we recognize this association and continuity not on the basis of a deterministic causal relationship, but on the basis of a collective will. A collective will which can negotiate among ourselves. Like, for instance, what is going to happen after this, my talk. Sipra will remind me exactly 5 minutes before I have to wind up. So you can please do that. I don't know, I have lost track of when I started talking. So when we recognize in our intellectual pursuit of understanding the human self, number one, in terms of the very fact that this individual is not an isolated individual, but always in association with others, the sociality. And this social self is not, again, fixed, spatially located, but in a continuum. It is in a process of, I won't call it progress, because progress is a word which is hierarchical in nature, that what you call linear, vertically inclined, that you are moving towards a higher. I need not necessarily go by that, but we are continuously in the process of becoming. If the nearest possible theoretical framework from the classical Indian tradition is a Buddhist notion of continuously becoming, the process of historicity, the temporality in which we live. So if we recognize the sociality and this historicity based on what you call human will, and I'm coming back to what I just said a while back, that after I complete my talk, there will be question and answer. So the ideas that I am throwing open will be under evaluation. It will be under critique. And this evaluation is not a relationship of cause and effect relationship, that I say something and you respond in a particular way. That is what Skinner and others will be doing, that when you do with the animal psychology, that, well, a very common example of a dog and a bell, that when a dog is fed with food, every time the food is fed, you ring a bell. So bell becomes an associated what you call what is stimulus to the dog's possible behavior. And dog's saliva keeps dropping out because of the hunger. And the experiment is that you stop giving the food to the dog, but you give the bell rings, and the dog start what you call oozing out with saliva. So that is what you call conditioned behavior with the help of additional stimulus. So the questions that are going to be asked after my presentation is not like a dog experiment, that I have said something and you will exactly question in a particular way. But it's one of us are a free will. Some of you will agree with me, some will disagree strongly, some will partially agree, and your questions, I have no control over them. I may be able to answer, I may not be able to answer. And that is my expectation of question answer, which will be free-willing question answer session, precisely hint about an awareness, and you don't have to metaphysicalize. It is an awareness, a consciousness with certain will, a willingness to ask questions, willingness to disagree, willingness to comment. So
Sir,
yeah.
Sir, you have 4-5 minutes
right?
left.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm almost through. So this idea of historicity and temporality twined with the human will and consciousness is a very powerful component to understand human society better. And this is, I find, much more meaningful when we talk about, when we try to understand communities in question, when we try to talk about value structure, ethical life world of specific communities. And then you realize that the will and ways the ideas have evolved in a community, those become very significant component of understanding the social reality. And that is why I thought this form of philosophizing, which is, one can say, descriptive philosophizing. Dilthey will talk about descriptive psychology as against explanatory psychology. So I would call it as not explanatory or verificatory method, but a descriptive mode of philosophizing where we recognize that I am aware about my situations, that I am not alone. I'm also always in the process of becoming, that I have changed over a period of time and hopefully change further. And this recognition, twined with a constant idea of will and consciousness, will help in better philosophizing and better comprehension of the reality around us. Thank you very much. This is all that I can share at the moment.
Thank you so much, sir. And we can take some questions. I can see raise hands from Rajiv Tripathi.
May I ask one question, Shipra?
Yes, sir, sure, sir. First,
Okay. Yeah, very small query. Actually, I could not listen properly because this Zoom link is not working in the audible sense. But the question is, I think, important. That's why I just jumped in. Bhagat ji is well known for his expertise on Sartre. But the question is, why you choose Dilthey? Why not Sartrean Marxist existentialism? That is of later Sartre, where he is trying to bring in Marx and trying to understand social reality, along with his concept of consciousness. So why Dilthey? This just came to my mind because this whole controversy regarding explanation and understanding has got a very long history in social sciences, and I am with you that you cannot remove values, consciousness in social inquiry. But the thing is, why you have left Sartre and Marx and came to Dilthey? This is rather something which is worrying me. Thank you.
Alokji also has worked on Sartre and also had been a Marxist scholar. I don't know his affiliation now, but I'm not a Marxist. I have studied Sartre. I was a Sartrean. But subsequently, as I have read more, I found lots of limitations in Sartrean philosophy on the very idea of consciousness, for instance. His limited focus of existentialism entirely based on Marxism, yet again is not recognizing the rich tradition of human will and historicity. So history is not always about dialectics. And that is what I feel that Sartre has left many things out. Even I have left out the mystical dimension of human nature, but these days I am recognizing that there are strong component of mysticism in human life, which we must not throw away. Right now, at this point of my lecture, I abstain myself from, but in the larger interest, I am more inclined towards recognizing the mystical as part of human inquiry, which I found Sartrean Marxian reading as extremely limiting to understand different dimensions of human existence. Yeah.
We have one more question from Rajiv Tripathi. Then Meera ma'am.
राकेश जी भी है, हाथ उठाए हैं।
हाँ सर, ये राजीव त्रिपाठी, आप एक पहले बोलिए।
हाँ
Yeah.
Sir, I have question related to consciousness and intentionality. Like, for example, when we are sleeping, and throughout the sleep, like there is no object present there. But when we wake up, we say that we slept well. So is it necessary that consciousness has to have an aboutness, or can consciousness just reflect on itself and tell about itself that it was having good experience or it slept well? So is it necessary that in every experience of life, the consciousness has to be directed towards an object of experience? Like, for example, in deep sleep, there is no
I got
object.
your point. I got your point,
Thank
Rajiv.
you.
I'll just quickly come to that. It's a very significant point on which I too have my own reservation with Husserl. You know, there was a time when we read Husserl like we जो भगवान को मानते हैं ना, कई बार जो academicians also do that. हम एक किताब को लेते हैं, गीता में जो कहा गया हमने उसी को मान लिया. वैसे हुसरल ने जो लिखा, सार्त्र ने जो लिखा, उसमें we don't question. Sometimes we take it as a gospel truth. You are absolutely right. This is a very clear distinction. You talk about Chit in Indian classical tradition, where the awareness, or Buddhism also, there could be a pure awareness, not necessarily always engage about an object. But I think what Husserl, Sartre, and others are trying to do is, in our conscious, mundane, voluntary world where we are living, anytime we engage ourselves, not talking about the sleep experience, but in our everyday activity that we do, our awareness and our action always are directed towards the world of objects. I think they are limited to that. So to that extent, मैं मानता हूँ. लेकिन there are other areas of consciousness, awareness, which are either mystical or which are trans-empirical. And I would say Husserl and Sartre, they were limited to the empirical world. They were not engaging with it. So I'm completely with you that there are possible ways of experiences, possible dimensions of human existence, which some of these philosophers, Sartre and others, have not, I would not say failed to, but their project is different. So their project must not be seen as the only way to comprehend the entirety of human consciousness. So let us put it like that. इसके अलावा मैं और एक जोड़ना चाहता हूँ. Not only directedness. You will also realize that Sartre does not recognize ego, whereas Husserl recognizes empirical and transcendental ego. Husserl के लिए ego जो I है, it is needed in order for any knowledge possibility, which Sartre denounces. This is another problem I have with Sartre, to come out away from him. As long as you were young, doing PhD, then continuously trying to write paper on Sartre, you start Eurozizing him. But more you start reflecting, reading more than what Sartre has written, then you also realize that there are serious problems with their philosophies. I'm totally with you.
So,
What
Meera
about
ma'am, you can
pre-reflective
ask.
consciousness?
आलोक जी, मैं बाद में आऊंगा.
Sir, we have another presentation. So we can take Meera ma'am's question and then Chandra sir, yours question. Yeah. Ma'am, you are muted.
मीरा जी, unmute. हाँ. Your button in the right side, no? The red color, you have to click there. No, I can't hear you.
Kindly unmute.
Yes,
now, now it is okay.
Yes,
okay,
yes.
okay.
Yes, yes.
Professor Oinam, thank you for your presentation, but I would just try to mention two things. That one is that the phenomenology, you mentioned phenomenology, which is of course the studies of the phenomenon of consciousness structurally. So you will also have to look at it structurally. That is one thing. Then the other thing you mentioned is that it cannot be, I don't know whether I heard you properly, that it cannot be defined. How do you define through words? But it can be defined through words rather. But in Indian context, we also define consciousness through silence, not just the words. Now, this is one aspect. The other aspect is the distinction is that when you mention Heidegger, the distinction between Dasein, I mean, I do not know German, so I don't know whether my pronunciation is Dasein. You're familiar with it. Dasein, does it replace consciousness and mind, or Dasein is being there to replace these? Is that distinction made? Then, if that is so, then how was consciousness defined? What are the characteristics of consciousness, which in Indian context we can define, and also, I mean, I can't though agree with you fully that Sartre did not involve in the engagement with people. I mean, his plays, his works, his essays, his writings, and he himself participated in the resistance movement. So therefore, involving people, or as you mentioned, in the human community is very much there with Sartre. So I can't define that. So therefore, and he defines, I mean, existence and being. These distinctions are clear there. So would you like to comment on these aspects?
Yeah. Lots of points, but first, quickly, I didn't say.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I know, don't have time. Sorry.
Yeah. No. You can hear me, Professor?
Yeah.
See, I did not say. Maybe if out of slip of tongue, it should not have happened. If I said anywhere that Sartre has not talked of collective, no, I didn't say that. Sartre was very much into Marxian thought, only he was a revolutionary in many ways. So I was critical of Sartre only on the idea of consciousness and ego, and also in a particular aspect of consciousness which he doesn't touch upon, what I'm saying mystical or transcendental. That is for my slowly moving away from Sartre. Not that, I have denounced my commitment to Sartre. Still, you can call me a Sartrean scholar. But I find that Sartre still has not been able to answer all my queries about human consciousness. See, you raised another point about, I don't know, this consciousness, and what about Heidegger? The consciousness and intentionality is largely a topic of Husserl. And if you look at Husserl's time frame is middle of 19th century, 1859 to 1938. Then prior to that, you have Dilthey, 1833 to 1911. So they are almost 10, 20 years, 20, 25 years difference. So influence of German certain idealism, romanticism to many, including Heidegger, is well known. When I was in Freie University talking of Heidegger only as a phenomenologist, many objected, German professors. They said, no, please do not see Heidegger only as a phenomenologist, but part of a tradition of German idealism and German romanticism. The point that Heidegger has used, he doesn't use the word consciousness. He used the word Dasein. Exactly, you are right. But then we must not expect Heidegger to use consciousness, the term, because that is not his project. To talk about consciousness in a very structured way is the aim and objective of Husserl. Husserl was more keen to understand the very nature, structural nature of consciousness, how we gather knowledge, how we gather scientific knowledge, intuitively driven knowledge. This was the agenda and objective of the philosopher called Edmund Husserl. Prior to him, almost coterminous, is Dilthey, who is not considered as a philosopher that way, but a theoretician who talks about certain form of unstructured consciousness in terms of will, in terms of historicity, right? Now, Heidegger's job is not at all Heidegger is interested to talk about structural nature of consciousness. Nowhere he talks of consciousness. His interest was to the ontology of being. His whole concern is what is it to exist? So what we call consciousness in terms of a tool to employ understanding human reality, Heidegger is not interested. He has not done that job. He has done a descriptive philosophizing. He has done that, but he doesn't use the word consciousness. His was all a question of what is it, what is the being as a first philosophy. I would put it like this. Yeah.
So one last question from Chandra sir. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Bhagat. As usual, a very beautiful presentation, as you usually do. I have, as you would anticipate, certain basic clarifications to seek. And that is that, when three principal things. One is that sometimes consciousness in philosophical study seems to be just a two-place predicate, that I am conscious of something. So the ontologization of consciousness is resisted by some. On the other hand, there are people who then talk about consciousness substantively. And then when they talk about substantively, then the question would be, how is it epistemically available? And is there a privileged access by which the first person is has the experience better than the other? But in all of that, the difficulty is, and as you rightly mentioned, that from a theologian like Dilthey or to empirical psychologists to philosophers, the way you approach and define the notion of consciousness is very different. Now, philosophers, can they do empirical psychology directly qua philosophers? That's one question. The second question that I wanted to ask you is that since you said that, most of the Western philosophers did not consider sociality as a part of the defining feature of the individual consciousness, I was just wondering that in case of Aristotle, the man as a social being, man as an ethical being, man as a linguistic being is essentially social. So we are language users and language is social, and therefore sociality is constitutively present in the individual, and then including his consciousness or her consciousness. Similarly, ethics is again intersubjective. So essentially, constitutively, the individual is intersubjective. And I really think, and I have maintained that very often, that the construction of the Cartesian ego as an isolated ego is also unfortunate, because just as he begins with the ego, he immediately brings in God, and the whole world is restored, which contains physical objects, as it were, and also the entire social reality. So there is no primacy except for the methodological thing that he has done. But I think social theorists do that, and everybody does that. So I was just wondering that how would you firstly and foremost define the ways in which the philosopher, as different from the empirical psychologist, would approach the questions of consciousness?
Thank you so much. You hit the nail at the right place. So true, my take on philosophy and mode of philosophizing is not from a popular general way of defining what philosophy is, but I take lots of clue, and as I'm a what you call border traveler, traversing through the borders of intersubjectivity. And that is why I found Dilthey extremely interesting. As I have been trying to not mention Dilthey as a theologian, but yes, you can take that. But if you also remember that psychology as a discipline has been predominantly controlled by the experimentalist and explanatory psychologist. But descriptive psychology is something that Dilthey was propounding and should come closer to philosophy as a method. That is one I would submit. I am not, and I have tried to avoid, at least today, to talk about structurally consciousness in terms of an epistemic tool, but consciousness in a very broad sense, which you're absolutely right. Many philosophers may not like this unbridled way of looking at consciousness. But I still think that this consciousness that I am talking about, unencumbered, if you allow me to use a particular analytic terminologies, encumbered and unencumbered. So the consciousness which is unencumbered, in the sense that it is everywhere, yet you cannot pin down and say, this is the consciousness. Because the consciousness is a form of awareness which is there in my self-introspection, in my association and interaction with you, in my imagination of a world, a better world, in my possibility of a poetic feeling. So an awareness which is not to be tied down as intentionality, as Rajiv was saying, that if intentionality is object-directed, then it is only one way, a very limited way of looking at consciousness. But for me, consciousness is an awareness, but unencumbered, somehow unbridled. But how is it? It is to be understood in terms of my way of using language. This is one way. Or my being in silence, as someone of you have just said, perhaps Miraji has said, in being silent, your awareness does not cease to be, right? So this awareness is the foundation to human life and living. And for me, that living is always collective. I agree with Rakeshji that each of the philosopher talks about a particular ways of philosophizing, but they don't deny the other. Like Descartes' ego does not deny the presence of God and others. So is the case with Dilthey. Dilthey does not deny the individual. Sartre does not deny the individual, but he also married the individual in the collective. But we can always say, what is the priority or focus of the philosopher? We cannot say that it is, you can do everything and anything. So are you focusing on ontology of existence of being? Is your focus on the consciousness, the structure of consciousness, an epistemic tool like Husserl has been doing? Or are you talking of consciousness in terms of historicity and collectivity, like Dilthey is trying to do? And I found this very interesting, particularly many of you may not be aware that my love and concern to study indigenous tradition is very strong, and I had been working on it. And when you try to understand the communities, the collective worldviews, you cannot do a dissection and do that. You go to their storytelling, you go to their way of living, you look at their collective imagination, folk traditions. And one way, a handy tool, is about an idea of consciousness which recognizes historicity and sociality as two tools of philosophizing, which I call as descriptive philosophy. You might say, well, what is descriptive philosophy? Maybe I can add to what you might criticize. Descriptive philosophy for me is a storytelling. And for me, storytelling is a way of philosophizing. If you think storytelling is an inferior way of doing philosophy, well, I'm happy to disagree. Because after all, your Wittgenstein, at certain points, this is what our colleague, senior colleague from Jadavpur, who has Priyambada Sarkar, right, published a book that when Wittgenstein fails to come with language in his analysis at one point, he turns his back to his students and starts reading Tagore's Gitanjali. You resort to poetry. So philosophizing must not be shy of doing poetry. Because poetry also talks a lot, which your analytical, tools sometimes cannot reach out because it is based on particular use of language in a particular way. And silence and use of language in particular way, different from the mundane, should also be part of philosophizing. You might call me a mystic or theologian, but I say I'm happy to be that.
थैंक यू सो मच सर, थैंक यू सो मच. और ये डिस्कशन तो बहुत लंबा होता जाएगा, पता है, but we have another presentation,
Yes,
sir.
I would like to listen to, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir. May I now request Rajiv Behera, sir, to start his presentation. Welcome, sir. Sir, your voice is
Am I
howling.
audible now?
Yes, sir.
Not audible.
Now you are audible, sir.
Raise the voice. Raise the volume.
Hello. Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Now you're audible.
It's clear. Okay. So firstly, I can pranam to the president and the moderator, and I pranam to all of them, and to the respected
kindly raise your volume, sir.
professors joined.
Sir, raise your volume.
Hello. Is it is Is it okay now? Is it
Yes,
okay?
sir. Yes, sir. Yeah. It's
Okay,
better.
okay. So thank you so much. I'm sorry for this technological disturbance, though I am going to discuss about some technological problems which has been rising from the very beginning in our language system. So I can pranam to all of you, those who join here, and more specifically about the president, moderator, and you can say director of this cave, and also the distinguished professors here, like Rakesh Chandra sir and Bhagat sir and Chakravarti ma'am and Prasant Shukla sir and so many other professors sir. As we know, the topic I chosen, it is my recent interested area, which is basically focused on the technological issues in language. So I have articulated the term like technolingualism and metrolingualism, more specifically reference to the W. Quine and Martin Heidegger. And I want to discuss here about two forms of language like traditional language and technological language. How these two languages are so crucial here. Again, need to discuss more about. But these two important forms, the two important forms of language are taken care by techno, you can say, utopianism in this era. And this paper is divided into several sections, and each section has discussed about some important issues. Firstly, I can say the era of rapid technological advancement is marked by a significant manner as we are controlled by the advancement of technology. And it is increasingly associated with the ill of our society. And we are struggling to find out common language within the sphere of techno-utopianism. As we know that language is an integral part of our species, is an integral another part of our species is Quine in his Word and Object argued that language is a social art. But Heidegger in his Being and Time, he has argues that language is the house of being. And Wittgenstein in his philosophical investigation argues that language is a form of life. So the problem concerning what is the future of language, uh, it is it has been underlined that those techno-utopianism kind of ideology helped with the consideration of universal language or qualities of language or influence of technology on language, or you can say explorations of language in the global level or not. Here, the issue concerning what is the future of language is well grounded in technolingualism as well as metrolingualism. Particularly one linguist, Philip Sorgent, in his book The Future of Language, How Technology, Politics and Utopianism argues that what lies in human language, and he claims that there are four main domains of future of language. What are these? One is the idea of universal language originated from utopianism with a vision of harmonious society. Secondly, the influence of technology on human communication and thereby its impact on our species, for which sophisticated communication skills are defining. Thirdly, whether our language is decaying or addressing a widespread concern about the loss in quality of our language skills. Lastly, how language can be subjected to control and manipulation, providing certain groups in powerful new tools. He demonstrates that thus a people and their interpretations of the world evolves, language continues to change and make it nearly impossible to predict its future trajectory. Furthermore, with regard to technolingualism and metrolingualism, he has been argues that the cultural changes that are continuously reflected in our language, there are new technologies emerging at a growing speed and shaping our interactions. Understanding this intimate connection between language and society and language and technology, various thinkers throughout history has been drawn to a particular vision. The existence of a universal language is an ultimate antidote to misunderstanding around the world. So the future of language presents multiple cases where people lived that removing communication barriers would create a claim that language is so much more than just a collection of words used to express our needs. Rather, it embodies our identity, our cultural heritage, and it defines our species, defines, yes, our species and its expectationalism. On the other hand, the idea of instantly translating our thoughts into text presents a range of dystopian scenarios and immediately promoting questions about privacy, questions about control. As Sorgent notes, a technology that interact with our brain's neuron signals could potentially utilized in a workplace to track employees' concentration level. Next, our relationship with technology extends beyond, you can say, language and permeates all aspects of our lives that we seek to automate for efficiency. Aside from the numerous profits it generates for some, an you can say, yes, it's the engine of technological advance in the persistence strives for improvement in every possible ways, a never-ending quest for utopia. This strive for perfection has been central to techno-utopianism. The idea, the idea of repairing our society with greater advancement, yes, but language challenges this technological determination. In spite of this occasionally alarming tone about how various technologies can undermine, or you can say, yes, undermine freedom of speech, The future of language paints a positive and confronting message by calling our attention to the inherent creativity of language and the resilience of human expressions. Human expressions is seen, for instance, in the case of the Chinese citizenships who has successfully circumvented censorship. Now, in the context, in the next section, we will explore the same scenario within the framework of Quine and Heidegger's. Heidegger emphasizes on hierarchy between traditional language and technological language within the relationship between language and technology and language and society. Firstly, Quinean semantics in the realm of technolingualism and metrolingualism. We have to focus on two important points like Quine's episto-semantic triangle, which consists three important subsets like interpretational perceptual standard, second one naturalistic explanation, third one is pre-established harmony of perception in neural level. Second one is Quine's Gabagai thought experiment. Here also we will focus on four important points like intertransability of language and intersubjectivity of language and linguistic internalism, behaviorism, and globalization. Now, Quine's semantics deals with issues how language functions and how language evolves within human discourse within the framework of language meaning reality. So central to this framework, the rejection of the analytic synthetic distinction and the idea that the empirical sciences provides the foundation of all knowledge are crucial. Here, Quine challenges the traditional notion of meaning as something fixed and something determinate, arguing instead of a holistic and empirical understanding of language. So, in traditional language, Quine challenges the traditional distinction between analytic and synthetic statements, which was a cornerstone of logical empiricism. Yes, and analytic statements were considered as true or false solely based on the meaning of the term involved and were thought to be known a priori. Synthetic statements, on the other hand, were understood as being true or false based on empirical evidence and were knowable a posteriori. So Quine's critique on this distinction led him to propose the idea of ontological relativity. This notion suggests that our conceptual scheme or the way we interpret or we understand the world are not fixed but are instead influenced by our empirical observation and experiences. In other words, our understanding of reality is not independent of our experiences, but it is shaped by them. So uh, this perspective has significant implications for semantics. The study of meaning in language, Quine argues that meaning is not something inherent in words, inherent in sentences, but instead cognizant. Sorry, it is contingent. It is contingent upon the overall structure of our conceptual framework. In other words, the meaning of a word or sentence is not determined solely by its dictionary definition or grammatical structure. Then what is this? But it is rather influenced by the broader context of our belief, broader context of our experiences. So Quine illustrates this idea through his concept of web of belief. According to Quine, our beliefs form a network, form a connectedness wave, where each belief is connected to each other and through various relationships. This web of belief includes not only linguistic elements, but also empirical observations, but also cultural, historical, and social contexts. For example, the meaning of words like freedom. Freedom may be understood primarily in political terms, while in another society it may encompass a broader notion of personal autonomy, self-expressions, etc. So the dynamic and context-dependent nature of semantic highlighted by Quine's view suggests that meaning is not static, but it is instead subject to change, subject to interpretation. So, words and sentences acquire meaning through their roles within the web of belief, which is constantly evolving, constantly adapting to new experiences and observations. Overall, Quine's perspective challenges the idea of fixed and determinate meaning in language, emphasizing instead the dynamic and interconnected nature of semantics within the broader context of our beliefs and experiences. While Quine did not directly address technological languages, his philosophical framework can provide insight into how we understand and interpret these languages. In the realm of technological language, which encompasses programming language, machine translation system, and digital interfaces among other forms of artificial and computer mediated communication. Yes. Quine's view on semantics provides valuable insights into how meaning is constructed, how meaning is understood within these domains. Firstly, Quine emphasizes on observation and empirical testing in determining meaning hold particular relevance in the context of programming languages. Unlike natural languages where meaning may be influenced by culture and historicity and social factors, but programming languages operate within a more controlled and formalized environment. Yes, in this context, meaning is derived not from abstract definition, but from the practical, but from the operational significance, significance of symbols within a computational system. For instance, in a programming language like Python's, the meaning of a statement like x is equal to y plus 2 is not determined solely by the individual meaning, but it is about the meaning of x, meaning of y, and 2, but rather by how these symbols are interpreted and executed within the conceptual framework. It is a computational framework. It's a question. So their meaning, Quine says that here the meaning emerges from the actions, operations performed by the program. So, which can be observed and empirically tested. So this operational view, the meaning aligns with Quine's broader naturalistic approach, which asserts that all knowledge claims should be grounded in empirical evidence. In the context of programming language, this means that the meaning of code is contingent upon its functionality and behavior within a computational environment rather than being inherent to the symbols or themselves. Furthermore, Quine's notion of the indeterminacy of translation has profound implications for machine translations and natural language processing systems. According to Quine's translation between language is inherently ambiguous and context dependent as it is influenced by the interpreter's conceptual framework and background knowledge. Still, in the context of machine translation, this implies that the meaning of text cannot be simply determined by substituted words from one language to another. Instead, it requires a nuanced understanding of context, intention, and cultural nuance. So here, machine translation system must grapple within the challenges, within the challenge of capturing the meaning of a sentence in its entirety in its considering not only individual words but also their relationship, idiomatic expressions, cultural connotations. For example, considering the phrase time flies like an arrow, which has a literal meaning but also carries a metaphorical interpretation. So, translating this phrase into another language requires not only replacing words within their equivalent but also capturing the underlying metaphors and its intended meaning. Hence, Quine's view of semantics is technological. Quine's view in technological language highlights the importance of observation, empirical testing, context in determining meaning. Whether in programming language or machine translation systems, understanding meaning requires more than just decoding symbols, or it entails grasping their operational significance or considering the broader text in which communication takes place. Here, we found that Quine's view on semantics pose significant challenges for contemporary philosophy of language and computational linguistics, particularly in reconciling the dynamic, context dependent nature of meaning with the demands for precise and unambiguous communication, especially in technological setting where efficiency and accuracy are crucial. One challenge arises from the tension between the contextual nature of meaning and the need for clarity and precision in communication, especially within technological context. Quine emphasis on the holistic nature of semantics, which suggests that the meaning of a word or a sentence is deeply intertwined with its surrounding context, including the broader network of beliefs, broader network of experiences, and cultural factors. However, these fields, such as programming or machine translation, where exactness or efficacy are paramount, accommodating this contextual variability presents significant challenges. Now come to the next one is that Quine's naturalistic approach to semantics, that is something you can say accentuates the inseparability of language from its broader cognitive and broader social context. So this is significant. This has some significant implications for the design of artificial intelligence system and human-computer interaction phases. So it suggests that meaning cannot be divorced from the cultural and social practices in which language embedded. So in the context of artificial intelligence, for example, understanding the social and cultural dimension of language is very much essential for developing systems that can effectively communicate and interact with humans. So here, artificial intelligence systems must be sensitive to the diverse ways in which language is used, in which language is interpreted across different cultures, across different social networks and contexts, to avoid biasness, to avoid misinterpretations. Similarly, in human-computer interface systems, it is considering the cultural norms, linguistic convention, social expectation, all plays a crucial role in designing interfaces that are intuitive, that are user friendly. So here Quine highlights the importance of considering these broader contextual interfaces in the design and implementation of technological systems to ensure that they effectively facilitate communications and interpretations. So therefore, we can say that Quine's view of semantics offers a rich and nuanced perspective on the nature of language in both traditional and conceptual context. Now come to the next one is that Heideggerian semantics in the realm of Technolingualism and Metrolingualism. Here we have to discuss about two important points again, like textualization. In this point, we have to focus on two important another sub-points like Socratic dialect and end of the human intellect. Secondly, cultural linguistic degeneration. Here, we have to focus on another 3 points, 4 points like non-alphabetic scripts, mechanization and abstraction, digitalization and mobilization. So here, Heidegger's philosophical perspective offers a unique lens through which we can examine the semantics of both traditional and technological languages. Both are rooted in existential phenomenology. Here, Heidegger's approach emphasizes the fundamental connection between being, language, and the world. In this section, we delve into Heideggerian semantics, exploring how this concept of being in the world and language as the house of being elucidate the nature of meaning in both traditional and technological context. Heidegger's ontology begins with the concept of Dasein, which he defines as the being for whom its own being is at issue. So according to Heidegger, Dasein is always already in the world, engaged in practical activities, engaged in emerged in a network of relations. So for Heidegger, language is not merely a tool for communication, but by the medium through which Dasein discloses the meaning of being. Meaning of being, yes. In traditional language, such as natural language spoken by human being, this disclosure occurs through everyday speech and understanding. So in traditional language philosophy, Heidegger presents a profound perspective on the nature of meaning, emphasizing the nature of lived experience. Yes, lived experience and language in shaping our understanding on the world. So he says that meaning doesn't exist in isolation but emerges from the context of lived experience. So this means that words and language gain their significance through their situatedness within the world of the Jain, which refers to human existence. Yes. So Dasein is not just a detached observer, but also an active participant in the world. Yes. So for for Heidegger, it yes. So Heidegger says that it engaged in a continuous process of interpretation and interaction. Within this framework, words are not static entities with fixed meaning, but it is instead continuously shaped and transformed by the ongoing engagement of the agile with its environment. So Heidegger introduced the context of hermeneutic circle. Why it is important? Because he want to describe this process. So the hermeneutic circle suggests that understanding always interpreted in light of one's pre-understanding and vice versa. In other words, our understanding of the world is always influenced by our prior experiences and interpretations, which is turn shape how we interpret new experiences and information. So this circularity underscores the dynamic and evolving nature of meaning within the context of lived experience. So furthermore, Heidegger emphasizes the active role of language, which is disclosing the world as a meaningful totality. So, for Heidegger, language is not simply a tool for representing re-existing objects and concepts, but actively participates in the constitution of reality. Yes, it is the case. Through language, the agile articulates its world, brings forth entities and relationships that would otherwise remain concealed. Yes, this conception of language resonates with Heidegger's notion of world disclosure, which refers to the process by which language existence reveals the world's meaning and significance through our engagement with it, emphasizing the interconnectedness between our understanding existence and world itself. Yes, for Heidegger, language serves as the means through which Dasein unveils the world as a meaningful context for its existence. By articulating the world through language, Dasein reveals the interconnectedness of being and significance of their relationship, thereby giving meaning of its significance. Heidegger's perspective on language and meaning emphasizes the inseparable connection between lived experience, language, and the disclosure of the world. So,
Sir, sir,
what?
you have
Yes.
last 5 minutes.
Oh my God. So now we can say that technological language here, according to Heidegger, it is something he says that the entities are reduced to calculable resources, and the world is treated as a standing resort to the exploits for human ends. This calculative thinking permits modern technological systems from computer algorithm to industrial processes where efficiency and productivity are prioritized over deeper existential consideration. Moreover, Heidegger wants to the dangers inherent in this transformation of language by reducing entities to mere resources and instrumentalizing the world. Technological language risk obscuring the deeper meanings and significance of peace. So now I come to the assessment of the study. Again, the concluding remarks on it that here we found that the above discussion provides a comprehensive study of Quine and Heidegger semantics, while Heidegger's existential approach emphasizes on the role of lived experience in shaping meaning within the context of human existence. Being in the world and hermeneutic circle aptly demonstrate the demonstrates the fundamental relationship between language existence and the totality of being. So here language is not tools for communication but also medium of survival, he says. Now, for Quine's perspectives here, we found some important points that Quine's naturalistic perspective, which challenges traditional notion of semantics, and he has emphasized the empirical basis of meaning. So Quine's rejection of analytic synthetic distinction and his conception of the web of belief provides valuable insight into the dynamics and context-dependent nature of meaning in language. Moreover, this paper aptly discusses Quine's view in the context of technological language, illustrating how his emphasis on observation and empirical testing aligns with the demands of computational system. However, this paper could further explore potential of, we can say, Quine's perspective. Regarding Quine's perspective, we can raise concern about his rejection of analyticity and his holistic view of meaning. So Quine's removal of analytic synthetic distinction, which had been you can say, it is very important for us. And we can argue that Quine's rejection of analytic synthetic distinction undermines the possibility of establishing something, you can say, objective truth and stable linguistic references, and it blurs the distinction between linguistic convention and empirical facts. Additionally, Quine's naturalistic approach offers valuable insight into the empirical basis of meanings. So I can say, by acknowledging the strength and limitation of Heidegger and Quine's view, we gain a deeper understanding of the science of meaning and its implication of human understanding and interaction. Moving forward, a nuanced approach that uh, integrates philosophical inquiry with empirical observation is essential for navigating the evolving landscape of language and communications. The broader categories of semantic relativity in human, Quine's philosophy of language emphasizes on triple ontology of language, where we notice there language is object, language is practice, and language is assemblies. With regard to techno-utopianism, the metaphysical intake of language is both Quinean and Heideggerian semantics refers to systems of belief and lenses through which to view oneself and the world concerning reality and being. Precisely, you can say existential commitment. And lastly, I can say it interplay something uh, the ontologies of language and the nature of language. Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. It's very hard to understand for me. कुछ मुझे समझ में नहीं आया.
I also missed some important points because of the
We
constraint
have
period of time.
we have
Otherwise,
we have
the
an important question from Chandra sir. So please.
sir,
Rajiv, very brilliant presentation as usual.
Ram,
But
sir, thank you so much.
right. And also, I think very interestingly immodest, because you are using very interesting phrases in the end that this paper aptly discusses that, and aptly. So it's. But let me bring in two small things for your consideration, which I think would be very useful for our further discussion. One, the account that you are giving in terms of Quine's understanding of language, especially as you pitch it with the technological languages, you seem to be initially bringing in a certain kind of semantical, syntactical, pragmatic, and
Yes.
semiotic consideration altogether in your own picture,
Yes, sir.
which is, to my mind, not Quine's picture. Because language as cultural, language as symbolic, language as pragmatically functional, language as having a syntactical feature which is transparent, like in early Wittgenstein, or language as semantical, are very detailed discussions on which Quine does not seem to necessarily go to the extent of saying that they're all there, number one. Number two, which I think to my mind is a rather difficult thing for you to address, and that is as follows. If you look at the essay that you have actually taken primarily for your consideration, Two Dogmas of Empiricism, in that Quine has very interestingly said that in an artificial language, which only has logical terms like un, no, and, etc., you can have analytical statements or logical necessities, but not otherwise. So a bachelor is an unmarried male, where un and have been defined. He said that in certain kind of artificially constructed stipulated meanings, you can have an analytical statement, but that is not the general feature of language. This he says very categorically. And on that, he has been, again, pinned down by Grice and Strawson. But for you, I think it creates an even bigger problem. If the technological language is completely artificially created, with specifics in mind, that X means this, Y means that, Z means this, and P means that, then in this case, the formal analyticity will not be rejected by Quine and cannot be. And this follows very clearly from the Quine's own position. So within the realm of the techno, because what you are trying to do is, in fact, many things together. One, you are trying to build in later Wittgenstein into Quine's early papers. Two, you are trying to keep the build in the semiotic, pragmatic considerations also within the framework of Quine's position regarding language. Three, you are trying to say that even in the technological language, which is artificially created, the context sensitivity remains in the sense of broad context sensitivity, and not just Fregean sense, where it was actually the meaning of the word is actually determined by the sentence in which it is used, because that's a very specific contextuality of the word having meaning within the context of a sentence. But you are building in the cultural, social, political, personal context, all of that. Now, that I think you have to be cautious, because this is a slope in which you have slipped.
Yes.
So, two considerations primarily, I go back. One, you're building too much into Quine's theory, which does not seem to come. He's not a cultural relativist. Two, you are there. He clearly says that in artificial language, like Gerald Cards does, analytic in English has a sense, but analytic in general does not have a sense. So that kind of a thing is very much there in Quine. And therefore, what you have built in this paper, primarily the technological and the metrological language, in that analyticity will remain.
So thank you so much, sir. Actually, it is my, I can say it is my one attempt to do something. It's my new interest as well. I'm just focusing on the language and technology. I'm reading some new recent development, recent theories or recent books. But here I noticed that Quine, in his book Word and Object, he has emphasized on one statement like language is a social art. Then how, what is the role of language in the society? Because as we know that in language is nothing but something, just a vehicle of communication. Rather, it carries, if you consider it's a vehicle of communication, but what we communicate, what language contains. So it is not just about the convey of meaning something, it could just convey the meanings of the sentence or words. Rather, it carries many other things, like what human being consists. As a human being consists something, emotions, feelings, many kind of, you can say communal entities, everything. So in that respect, I want to picturize that through some aspect or some terms of angle, from one angle, I think I failed to provide the justification. I failed to justify all the statement, all the arguments. So in that context, sir, you are right. But I'm working, sir. Actually, so this paper is not, of course, something fine paper, because it's also my new interest, new interested area. So therefore, you are right, sir. But I found I want to engage my mind in this respect only, sir. So looking at the one book, word and
Yeah.
object,
No, but my
I
major
found.
point is that in the technological language, which is artificial, analyticity would remain. And even Quine would admit that, because it is artificially created. The whole language is artificially created. So through stipulative definitions, you will have created analytical statements. And Quine has no trouble with that.
Yes, sir. But from apart from your standpoints, I just look at the scenario of the society. If the society is approaching, or you can say demanding, the situation which has been created by technology, and we are living within that, so uh, there is no I think there is no so much problem regarding the same. Rather, we can cope up with or overcome the situation within the realm of uh, that. Otherwise, that is still that remains. You are right, sir.
So we have two more questions. First from Meera Chakravarti ma'am, then Anup itself. Yeah.
Thank you, Rajiv. You mentioned the context of subjectivity. So I just wanted to wanted you to reflect. Can the Cartesian position of cogito, be applied to the AI one? Because AI may not may show the thoughts or contents which you, of course, say. I would not disagree, but then that there is an I which represents a partial agency. Where is that I which appears to think? That is one, because AI does not justify subjectivity of others. Then how would the relation of AI associated with subjectivity? Subjectivity can be justified. Would you kindly
Yes.
just reflect on that? I mean, it's not just a question. I mean, I find that this cogito's Cartesian cogito cannot be applied, because now there is also the things which are coming saying AI and virtue. How do you AI and ethics? And these questions are being
Yes.
raised. So if AI
Yes.
is not a being, then without a being, how do you associate ethics, problem of ethics, to AI? So that is my genuine problem. So would you just, it's not a judgmental question on you, but it's just a request to reflect that if you cannot associate subjectivity, then how would we posit this question? That's all. No, good paper. Thank you so much.
Many thanks, ma'am, for your important query, which will help to develop my paper. Yes, so develop my interested area also. I found some sense that in philosophy it is very difficult to make a radical boundary between thought and language. Though we deal the case always in the study of philosophy of language and analytic philosophy, but still it is a question which is always remain that there is no so much radical boundary between language and thought. How do you claim that it's something language, it is something thought? So in that respect, it is very difficult to, you can say, yes, difficult to claim that who is not a subject, whether he's a linguist or he's a, you can say, uh, that means uh, that means who is thinking. Suppose at the time of thinking, what we thinks, who thinks. So all sort of questions are very fundamental in philosophy of language and as well as philosophy of mind. So when we deal the situation of subjectivity, with relate to both the sides, both the branches, philosophy of language and mind. Obviously, it is problematic. But in the Cartesian approach of existence of a being limited to a subject, that means limited to a subject, a particular being, is something ridiculous to his mind. His mind, his mind, and it is, you can say, particular mind. But it doesn't mean that what the mind or what is happening in the mind is sufficient to claims that the mind exists. Rather need to express. So once the subject or the mind will express something, it will be socialized, so that there is some sort of extension or extended version of Cartesian approach of subjective identity is inherently present within the society. Or yes, otherwise, I
That's quite a funny thing. Anyway, I'll wait for it. Now, is this X generation's perspective we also learn. Thank you. That's, I don't quite agree. Well, anyway, if it is an extension, okay. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you, ma'am.
Shipra.
Thank
And,
you. Thank you so much,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
May I request Alok sir to ask the question?
Thank you, Shipra.
Thank you.
I think we must ask a question from the angle or the perspective of Heidegger. Heidegger's critique of technology. If language is some sort of artificial construct, then how Heidegger's critique of technology, taking traditional technology as some sort of bringing forth and the modern technology as some sort of challenging force. So two ways of looking at technology, are they also two ways of looking at language, or language remains the same? If the language of technology remains the same, then what is the point in discussing so much about technological language? Because technological language comes from natural science, and natural science language is very much universal. So this whole idea of having cultural, social, and all that those things may not apply to the modern technological constructs. So I don't know whether I could articulate my worries properly, but would you like to respond it?
So thank you so much, Alok sir. So it's a very interesting point. As you know, we the people are living in an era which is demanding certain devices through which we have to survive. So it is a big challenge for the society, for the present society. But it doesn't mean that that means human, we are not using devices from the very beginning of the human civilization. Rather, they are also using in certain way, but that primitive technology is not primitive technology was not creating any problems for the society in terms of communication, in terms of relationship, anything else. But your point is that Heideggerian semantics is built or how Heideggerian semantics is constructed through the modern technological space or modern technological improvement. Sorry, modern technology. The point here is we the human beings are very familiar with technology from the very beginning. There is no issue. But here the advanced technology is something advanced way of thinking. So technology is confined to human mental or human mental culture. That means how we culture our mind, accordingly we engage with engage with objects. In that respect, the advancement of technology is inherent, is somehow interconnecting the human in many in many activities of human beings. So that cannot be avoided. But the new way of looking at the device is the case in order to formulate some sort of sense of the sentence through the devices is a challenging case. But it is not the case in certain respect in Heideggerian perspective, because what we do, what is the main essence of the main essence or entities which we use in devices through which we interact with each other. That is nothing but the language. So language may be different pieces, different different species or different types or different different forms. That's not matter. Matter is whether whether uh, we use language in the devices for communication or other things. No, it is the case we just use language. So we just change the form of the language into different into the devices in different manner. So that is the case. That is not so much challenging for Heidegger, or Heidegger also accepted that, because Heidegger already considered that as a human being we need language, and language, we reside in the language. So how we use language, that is different aspect. So that is not so much important. Important is what we use for our survival. We use language for our survival. Language is the essence, and you can say yes, essence of the essence of our life, our survival. So how we use that is secondary part. The primarily language is the important one. So therefore it's not a problematic for Heideggerian perspective of semantics for understanding bias.
Sir,
I think
Rajiba sir, we are already ahead of time, and
yes,
I know
thank
you
so
are
much.
informed, and this will be continuing. And thank you so much for all the presentation, all the queries you have solved, and thank you all. And with this, uh, with this mega episode, our season 1 ends, and we will soon enter season 2. Season 2 will be focused and dedicated to the great contemporary Indian philosophers in past 100 years. And we will meet again on 16th June. Till then, namaskar. Stay connected. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Alok
Thank you so
sir.
much.
Thank you, Ramesh Chandra
Thank you
sir.
so
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
very much,Iprat. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Chitra.
Thank you, sir.